Get healthy, get smarter, save time, feel better, feel confident, be happier, change yourself. These are the promises of self-help. And they sound pretty good, right? They sound like who you want to be. Because we've been convinced that we are not healthy, not smart, not efficient, not confident, and not happy. Well, maybe we're not. Maybe we do need help. And maybe opening that book, buying that seminar, or listening to that podcast is what we need. But the self-improvement movement has us in a chokehold. It's convinced us that we're not good enough so that we'll purchase our way into happiness. And the plan is working. The self-improvement industry was valued at approximately $38 billion in 2022 and is projected to grow to around $80 billion by 2030. Americans spend over $11 billion annually on self-improvement books, seminars, coaching, apps, and personal development tools. Over 20 million self-help books are sold annually in the US. The market for personal growth apps was worth $1.1 billion in 2023 and continues to grow. And approximately 10% of adults in the United States have attended a self-improvement seminar or workshop. These are massive numbers, and they're mostly built on us feeling bad about ourselves. It's normal to grapple with feelings of depression and anxiety. It's only human to feel unsure about our future or our relationships. Of course, we might have to seek out outside help in order to feel better. But far too often, the self-help industry preys on our very real insecurities and struggles to make a quick buck. It all makes sense. We are in a particularly divisive, scary time in history. With the internet at our fingertips, the endless anxiety accompanying doom scrolling awaits us. Self-help books, workshops, and more offer us ways to combat all of the things that we feel are wrong with ourselves or our lives. They can teach us about empowerment and personal growth by offering us a sense of control over our lives. We might learn to develop skills that we didn't have before to regulate our emotions, budget our time better, or set a better routine. By teaching us about things like mindfulness to regulate stress, it can boost our physical health by giving us information about dieting and fitness and promoting better sleep habits. If we've focused on achieving certain goals, there are resources that can bring us closer to them. We might be searching for purpose in our lives or want to make better decisions about our health, work, or relationships. Self-help leaders and the lessons they teach can give us an increased sense of self-awareness. By understanding our strengths and weaknesses better, we can grow into the people that we envision. We can boost self-esteem and better communicate with others in our lives. But for all the promises the self-help industry makes, there is one major pitfall. No person has the same experience, and therefore no person has the same problems that need solving. The one-size-fits-all solutions that self-help resources often offer us cannot be tailored to our individual needs. Professional advice can differ from one career to the other. The resume tips for a career in the arts look very different than if you're trying to get hired as a financial analyst. So people look to self-help to solve problems they face in their career and get better at networking, leadership, and finding new professional opportunities. But with the wide array of advice out there, it's easy to get paralyzed by which help might apply to you. You can set whatever professional goals you want, but if you're not able to sift through the advice to accomplish those goals, how far can you really get? We've all found ourselves in a situation where we have a problem, and seemingly everyone in our lives has an opinion about it. Our parents call and text us with their 2 cents. A friend lectures us with their thoughts over coffee, and then a mentor chimes in with a completely different set of ideas. This is what it's like to get caught up in the self-help industry. It's a complex web of advice, some good and some not. And it's almost impossible to draw the distinction. Similar to our hopes for our careers, we often turn to self-help to live more authentically and find a sense of personal accomplishment in our lives. We want to find that elusive meaning and purpose that will make our lives feel complete. We want to have a stronger relationship and communicate better with the people that we love. Often, self-help can provide an accessible, relatively inexpensive way to try and get there. But just like that career advice, finding purpose doesn't have a broad solution. Each of us has a different, incredibly unique path to forge. And if we think all the answers lie in some books and seminars, we're completely missing the point of life, which famously does not come with an instruction manual. Self-help programs thrive on prepackaged solutions like morning routines, productivity hacks, and fitness regimens. These might not all align with our individual preferences, lifestyles, or needs. Still, we feel a pressure to fit the mold, not only because the program is telling us to, but because we see these self-help gurus and their followers seeming to succeed at it. Wanting to find fulfillment and purpose isn't a new concept by any means. For generations, people have been trying to find success and happiness. In fact, the first widely read self-help book appeared in the 1930s. Dale Carnegie wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People in 1936 in an attempt to help individuals with their interpersonal skills and personal success. Then, in 1937, Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich, which laid out advice on how to harness one's mindset in order to control their life's outcomes. While the world might seem incredibly different than it was in the 1930s, there's one eerie similarity that we just can't overlook. The Great Depression thrust people in the 1930s into famine, destitution, and confusion about the future. Wealth inequality was soaring in the United States, and affairs abroad were increasingly on shaky ground as Adolf Hitler gained influence in Germany. Times of uncertainty create the perfect recipe for self-help gurus to step in with the solutions. Did Carnegie and Hill's books offer some solace for people struggling? Probably. Did they fix everyone's problems? No way. From the 1930s until now, self-improvement has often been framed as a personal journey, focusing on mindset, habits, and discipline. But true growth, whether in our own lives or on a global scale, often requires more than just individual effort. It's about having the right tools and resources to build a stronger foundation. This doesn't just apply to people, it applies to the planet too. While small actions like recycling and reducing waste are important, solving the biggest challenges like food security and climate change demand large-scale, innovative solutions. That's exactly what today's sponsor, Brazil Potash, is working on. Brazil Potash is revolutionizing agriculture by transforming how potash, an essential crop nutrient, is produced and distributed. Currently, 95% of potash used in Brazil is imported from thousands of kilometers away, from countries like Canada and Russia. This reliance on imports not only creates a vulnerable supply chain, but also generates substantial greenhouse gas emissions. By producing potash domestically, Brazil Potash is addressing these issues head-on. Their new facility will reduce transportation-related emissions by 80%, equivalent to planting 32 million trees each year. With a production target of 2.4 tons of potash annually, they're poised to supply a significant portion of Brazil's agricultural needs. One of their major initiatives includes a 10-year agreement with the Amaggi Group, one of the world's largest private soybean producers. Under this partnership, Brazil Potash will provide 550,000 tons of potash annually. And that's just the start. Brazil Potash plans to have 80% of their production secured under similar long-term agreements, creating a stable, local supply for Brazil's growing agricultural market. Whether we're improving ourselves or the planet, having a strong foundation is key. Click the link in the description to learn more about how Brazil Potash is building that foundation, cutting emissions, and securing a sustainable future. Now, let's shift back to a more recent crisis that has tested humanity's resilience. Millions of people face job losses and uncertainty, turning to self-help as a way forward. But did those solutions really work? Let's take a closer look. During and after the 2008 financial crisis, many Americans felt like their lives were crumbling. They were losing jobs and homes, looking for solutions. Throughout the 2010s, the world of self-help exploded, particularly online. Self-proclaimed gurus identified the strife that people were going through and found a way to target it with broad solutions and inspirational stories. Brené Brown, a research professor and New York Times bestseller, emerged as the most famous expert on shame, vulnerability, courage, and worthiness. She coined the term wholehearted living. Millions of people who were feeling left behind, self-conscious, and unsure about how to access their inner emotions turned to Brown for advice and guidance. Tim Ferriss published his bestseller, The 4-Hour Workweek: Escape 9 to 5, Live Anywhere, and Join the New Rich, which pushed his readers to change their relationship with work and rethink their overall lifestyle and habits. This kind of optimization self-help proliferated during the decade as people, on the heels of the financial crisis, began to think differently about how their careers and how work and life intertwined. These self-help gurus, who were predated by famous names like Tony Robbins, Eckhart Tolle, and Deepak Chopra, were only the tip of the iceberg. Also in the 2010s, another market for self-improvement leaders came into its heyday: social media. Suddenly, anyone could give advice with a few taps of their fingers for the world to see. No credentials needed, no publisher to answer to, just your ideas and your followers to preach them to. And then COVID hit. Suddenly, the entire world was thrown into chaos. In those first few months, we had little else to focus on other than our own mortality and the fate of the world. This brought up a lot of questions, like, why are we here? Or, am I fulfilled? Am I happy? The already vast and lucrative world of self-help had an entirely new audience. People who before would have never asked themselves certain existential questions were suddenly contemplating their life's purpose. People who had thought their careers were on the right track had a wrench thrown into their plans and couldn't make sense on where to go next. COVID took the need for self-improvement to a whole nother level as the world searched for meaning and answers, and that quest continues to this day. Now, like in the 1930s, the world is in flux. People's livelihoods have been thrown into chaos. Uncertainty rules, and uncertainty is a very uncomfortable place to live. It's natural and even healthy to ask for help, but where that help comes from is key. With the proliferation of self-improvement on social media specifically, it can be easy to fall into a trap of an influencer or guru whose life looks enviable and to think they must know how to be happy and have it all. When we are in pain and looking for answers, any solution can seem appealing. But overall, self-help has mixed results. Studies suggest that 85% of people who get started on self-improvement efforts abandon them within 6 months. They might have unrealistic goals and realize that this one-size-fits-all model of self-help isn't so helpful. Or they might feel a lack of support, which speaks to the disconnect that people can feel between them and these elusive self-help figures. And even for the 15% of people who might find solutions through these programs and advice, is the price tag worth it? Some life coaching programs and seminars charge anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000, which makes self-improvement a serious financial investment for some people. For those of us who wouldn't shell out thousands of dollars on seminars and programs, we're not off the hook when it comes to the chokehold that the self-improvement industry has on our bank accounts. The average consumer spends $200 to $500 annually on personal development resources like books and podcasts. They get us by promoting something that can elude us, which is happiness. The global pursuit of happiness has driven an increase in interest in self-help. Searches for how to be happy rose by 125% over the past decade. While some in the self-help industry might have good intentions and even good ideas, there's too much room for danger. There is a long list of ways for people to become addicted to advice, to drain their bank accounts, and to convince themselves that happiness, fulfillment, and riches are all right around the corner. Diving into self-help can lead to perfectionism and burnout. Approximately 67% of people report feeling overwhelmed by the number of self-improvement strategies available. This leads to decision fatigue and paralysis. The phrase "too many cooks in the kitchen" comes to mind. We all like to think that having a finish line can be helpful, giving us something to reach for and allowing a sense of accomplishment to build inside. Except when we think we should always be improving, there is no finish line. The focus on growth as an ongoing process can foster a sense of inadequacy, since perfection is always just out of reach. This insistence on never-ending improvement also leads to unrealistic standards for ourselves. The self-help gurus who have taken over people's bookshelves, social media feeds, and daily thinking often become idealized role models. Even the most well-intentioned self-help gurus evoke a sense of envy in their followers because that's the whole point. Programs also tend to highlight success stories of ultra-productive, disciplined, or happy people, which can set unattainable benchmarks for the rest of the consumers. The result is that people become hyper-focused on their flaws. Since self-help identifies areas of improvement by its nature, the movement can lead people to fixate on their shortcomings. This becomes counterproductive, and participants can become more dissatisfied or unhappy than they were in the first place. Numerous tools that self-help programs preach lead to an overemphasis on productivity and efficiency. We become trained to measure our worth by our output. Frameworks specifically for professional advancement and self-optimization tie self-worth to productivity. Therefore, if people aren't being productive, they're not succeeding. So what do we do if we're in one of these programs? We start to sacrifice things like rest and fun in order to meet our productivity goals. Does that really make us happier? The hustle culture preached in the self-help movement glorifies working harder and longer. It promotes the idea that success only comes through relentless effort. This type of binary thinking, that you're either all in or you're out, inevitably leads to failure. It's not uncommon with self-improvement methods to find there is no room for partial progress or flexibility. You must prescribe to the method, or the method will not work. These types of all-or-nothing goals focus on achieving grand things, but often ignore the incremental progress. We are all imperfect, and we always will be. Self-improvement that is focused on always being better and better and better convinces us that imperfection cannot coexist with greatness. However, if we struggle on our journey with self-improvement, there is very little space in the industry for us to express it. Toxic positivity is rampant in the self-help industry. It's the voice of that influencer constantly cheering her followers on and reminding them that everything is going to be great, even when it's not. It's the book that never contains a chapter about setbacks and negative emotions, making the reader feel lost when they hit a roadblock. It's the fitness expert never accounting for injury or self-doubt along the way. We cannot realistically live in a world of constant positivity. This expectation that we can and always should be progressing and feeling optimistic is crushing. The self-improvement movement preaches self-acceptance, but the widespread toxic positivity within it doesn't leave much room for actual self-awareness and self-care, which can often come in the form of slowing down. Social media is the perfect place to perpetuate this myth of always be improving. The self-help movement has grown exponentially on social media, allowing anyone who has an opinion and some charisma to become a guru. There have always been snake oil salesmen trying to tell consumers how to better themselves, but if you really wanted to spread your ideas, it took some legitimacy to get yourself out there. Now, a book deal or an in-person workshop isn't even necessary to gain a following. Social media also proliferates comparison culture. Self-improvement influencers often present curated, idealized versions of their lives. This creates pressure for their followers to measure up, which is an impossible task. By sharing the highlight reels of their perfect routines, habits, and achievements, online self-help leaders can intensify the feeling of hopelessness and doubt in those seeking to make strides in their own lives. And in a way, that's the point. The more helpless people feel, the more they'll seek help, even if the help itself is making them feel helpless. The self-improvement movement provides a plethora of tools and techniques in the form of books, apps, guides, workshops, and overall strategies. This can become overwhelming for individuals who suddenly feel like they have to master their chosen method and all of its skills. As we move forward with self-help methods, we might experience FOMO, the fear of missing out. It can feel like we're not doing enough if we don't follow every single recommended practice. You might be meditating 10 minutes a day, cutting processed sugars out of your diet, and journaling every evening, but you just can't find the time to also resistance train 3 times a week. In that case, is the whole method moot? It might feel that way. These rigid guidelines can discourage adaptability and self-forgiveness for occasional lapses in the program. And since self-improvement is often inherently broad and generic, it's expected that certain people won't quite fit the mold that's provided. All of this can lead to individuals blaming themselves for not being better. If progress isn't achieved, or even if it isn't felt, self-blame is wrapped up in the entire ethos of self-improvement. We are meant to believe that we have total and complete control over who we are and how we go about our lives. But this type of thinking just doesn't take into account our circumstances, world and life events, our educational or emotional backgrounds, plus the factors that are simply out of our control. By downplaying external factors, self-help guides can actually get in the way of some of the very things they say they are trying to foster: self-awareness and authenticity. By encouraging conformity and success at all costs, self-improvement advice often emphasizes discipline and positivity over creativity and spontaneity. If we're following self-help methods to improve ourselves, we might suppress authentic behaviors or preferences that don't align with our prescribed method. In the end, we become so over-reliant on metrics, habits, and goal setting that we forget about the bigger picture. Self-improvement programs are usually about measuring progress to attain a larger goal. If we only pay attention to these measurements, we're sidelining more subjective and unconventional self-expression. We could be on a fitness journey to get stronger and suddenly discover that we love playing tennis. However, our routine is already filled with daily lifting and HIIT sessions, leaving no time for other activities. Do we sacrifice exploring something we love or are interested in just because it doesn't fit the program? As much as we want to turn to help, the industry of self-improvement has made us at times over-reliant on it. We think that following a program is the best path to whatever kind of success that we're looking for. Ultimately, success is finding independence. It could be paying off debt and securing financial freedom. It could be losing weight to be free from the grasp of a looming health issue. It could be working through trauma to find independence from depressive thoughts. But in order to find all kinds of independence, we have to think for ourselves. The business of self-improvement is relying on us staying convinced that we cannot think for ourselves. There are plenty of emotional and individual dangers in the self-improvement movement, but perhaps the biggest red flag is the sheer amount of money that self-help leaders and the industry that surrounds them make off of consumers seeking guidance. It's estimated that the monetary value of the self-improvement movement is growing at about 8% per year. This is about the same growth rate as the global clothing industry. Do we really need these books, workshops, and online seminars as much as the clothes on our back? The commoditization of self-improvement is made possible by modern-day humans' endless consumption. Capitalism thrives on creating perpetual demand, and self-improvement products emphasize ongoing inadequacy, which encourages consumers to keep buying solutions rather than fostering a state of fulfillment. If we always think that there is something wrong with us or we're not quite where we want to be yet, we will keep buying the products that promise us to get there. This creates a capitalist productivity fetish. Self-improvement frameworks equate personal value with productivity, aligning with capitalism's focus on efficiency and output. And the constant pursuit of that efficiency and output leads to overwork, stress, and burnout, which can plague every area of capitalism. Incessantly working ourselves can be as exhausting as having a stressful day job that we have to go to every day. Just like we all struggle to define our self-worth outside of our careers, we can similarly struggle to define our self-worth outside of our self-improvement goals. What if instead we were just worth something for simply being who and how we are? That idea wouldn't fit too well in the capitalistic model that self-improvement has largely adopted. Capitalism often positions happiness as something to be purchased or achieved through consumption. Feeling down? Buy some new clothes. Feeling stressed? Buy this magical calming elixir. Feeling hopeless? Buy this new course on how to create the life you want in 5 simple steps. The problem is that so many people experience cost barriers to these types of solutions. Self-improvement resources like expensive seminars or coaching programs are often accessible only to those with disposable income, exacerbating inequality. While they might be more cost-effective than individual therapy sessions, the constant need to keep purchasing workshops, books, and guides can end up breaking the bank all the same. These barriers can create an air of exclusivity for self-help methods. While self-improvement gurus advocate empowerment, its commercialization often excludes marginalized groups who might benefit the most from these tools. And in turn, the exclusivity makes even the most lackluster and unproven methods seem like something to be desired. With savvy social media marketing, we can easily become convinced that buying a 10-week course from a yoga teacher and life coach we've never met is absolutely going to solve all of our problems. This isn't to say that there aren't people out there who have genuine methods and advice, but the noise can be so overwhelming that often, as with most things in a capitalistic society, those with the best selling points and marketing win. It's not uncommon to find well-marketed self-help methods filled with false promises and exploitation. There is a quick-fix mentality that stresses regimented and easily digestible solutions. The problem, as mentioned, is that most solutions end up being generic and often not applicable. In monetary terms, the more broad the proposed solutions are, the more people will buy into their possibility. This can lead to predatory practices from self-proclaimed gurus. They might exploit people's vulnerabilities with overpriced, ineffective programs and prioritize profit over genuine growth. Even the most well-intentioned of us can feel the pull of capitalism and wealth, so it's no wonder that some self-help gurus end up exorbitantly wealthy. Whether it's due to the efficiency of their programs or simply that they are good salespeople often remains up for debate. Tony Robbins, famous for his coaching programs, self-improvement seminars, and business ventures, is worth about $600 million. Deepak Chopra, known for his wellness programs and speaking engagements, has written over 90 books and has a net worth of about $80 million. The money circulating around this industry is laying in wait for those who can find a way to market themselves and their ideas effectively. The amount of money to be gained from selling self-improvement methods often gets in the way of the goal of the methods themselves. Genuine self-improvement emphasizes personal fulfillment, relationship, and intrinsic goals. Capitalism often prioritizes extrinsic rewards like wealth, status, and material possessions. This creates inherent tension between these two value systems, and for the most part, capitalism ends up winning. Individuals who dive headfirst into self-improvement programs often end up defining themselves by the number of programs they completed. This de-emphasizes a focus on authentic self-discovery that exists separately from any sort of prescribed method or set of ideas. Put simply, the business of self-improvement encourages us to be defined by how much money we spend on our own betterment rather than by how much better we actually feel. And the truth is that working through self-help guides might actually be having a reverse effect. A 2016 study looked at the physical and neurological reaction to people consuming self-help books and found that consumers of growth-oriented self-help books presented high cortisol, the stress hormone. The study also found that consumers of problem-focused self-help books had high depressive symptoms. Even though we turn to these types of books to feel better, happier, smarter, and healthier, they physiologically and emotionally can make us actually feel worse. They create an expectation the moment we open them. As soon as you watch a video from an online self-help influencer talking about sleep hygiene, do you automatically feel pressure to have perfect sleep hygiene? Well, you're not alone. The self-help industry, which is rooted in well-intentioned goals and values but has gone off the rails, has now become an industry of expectation and pressure. So how do we balance these well-intentioned values with the misguided system that has emerged in the self-improvement movement? To reconcile the conflict between self-improvement and self-judgment, we have to ensure that self-improvement is a tool for genuine empowerment rather than reinforcement of capitalistic exploitation. If you feel yourself getting trapped in an endless cycle of purchasing seminar after seminar and watching video after video, you're most likely only going to feel worse about yourself. Instead of getting caught in perpetual consumption, try and shift focus to sustainable intrinsic growth. Perhaps there is one piece of advice or one step of guidance that really resonates with you. Try running with that one. Explore what guidance means to you instead of how it's supposed to fit into some larger agenda. If we can step outside of the industry trying to sell us on our own self-improvement, we can combine the helpful parts of self-help with our own intuition to make better choices and feel more confident in how we live our lives. It's also important to be wary of falling into the trap of perfectionism. When evaluating self-improvement programs that involve goal setting, it's easy to overlook the importance of self-compassion and acceptance. Growth is important, but growth only matters if we have the ability to keep going in life. Self-help gurus often rely on preaching the idea of optimization. Whether it's maintaining the perfect diet to build muscle mass or scheduling your day down to the minute to use your time most efficiently, some of these methods might work at times, but in the long run, most people will fall into a sort of obsession. If you miss a workout or take some unscheduled time to rest, it might feel like you're failing. It might feel like you're letting yourself down. But perfection is unrealistic, and progress is often more important than our goals themselves. While a self-help program might not celebrate the wins along the way and keep you focused on the ultimate goal, recognizing small triumphs as well as setbacks and flaws is not only a healthy way to approach growth, but it's the only way to approach it that will keep us chugging along without burning out. Once you get on the self-improvement hamster wheel, it can be difficult to get off. But staying on will inevitably lead to exhaustion. If the point of any kind of self-help is to equip you with the tools to better yourself, pausing and acknowledging the importance of imperfections along the way is a key component. This kind of reflection is the only way we can retain our individuality. Unfortunately, an abundance of self-help methods assume that we are all the same, and therefore that the same advice will work for all of us. Of course, there are universal experiences like doubt, loss, and anxiety, but there is never a one-size-fits-all approach to dealing with them. Instead of interpreting the words and advice in a self-help book or a post you see on TikTok as gospel, what if you sought out adaptable frameworks that you could tailor to your own needs? Ignore the exact breakfast that random fitness guy laid out on his Instagram story and do some research about a variety of healthy breakfasts so you can choose the one that you'd be most excited to eat. Make the work easier for yourself instead of trying to become someone you're not. By shifting our focus away from conformity, we are able to validate the things that make us unique. Our traits, habits, and aspirations are like no one else in the world, and we should celebrate that. If you're on a self-improvement journey, take the advice that resonates and leave the rest behind so that you don't lose your individuality. Self-improvement is nothing without self-expression. Once we are able to think for ourselves and value what makes us unique, we're much less susceptible to jumping on board with any one self-improvement program. Instead, we might be able to finally view the self-improvement movement for what it ideally should be: an opportunity to foster kindness towards ourselves and help us build self-esteem. Having compassion towards ourselves is an easy way to block out those overly critical and perfectionistic tendencies, and it's a great way to interrupt the profit-driven side of the industry. The downfalls of self-help are most apparent when dealing with self-help that is compulsive and prescriptive. These kinds of programs are meant to get us hooked on wanting to be better in every single possible way. They're more profit-driven than actually wanting to help the people who sign up or consume them. And like anything in a capitalistic society, once an industry has us addicted to its product, it's nearly impossible to step away from it. Is self-improvement truly dangerous? No. The industry and movement that has been built around it is. Wanting to improve is not a bad thing, but thinking we can read or watch or listen ourselves into improving is a myth we've been sold. If we can approach self-improvement with a tactful eye instead of diving into the abyss, we can take what works for us and leave behind the rest. We can recognize when we're being conned and not helped. We can lean into our authentic selves and reject conformity. And we can accept that wanting to be better doesn't mean that we aren't already good.